Right. So hello and welcome everybody. My name is Stacey Lee Ross. I will be your host tonight, and our wonderful guest today is going to be Dr. Michael McMillan, author, playwright, dramatist, PhD supervisor, academic, an all-round amazing person with a lot to share tonight about the history of Black Caribbean people in Britain using the context of his now quite famous artwork and installation, The Front Room. And if you weren't aware, this program tonight and the 3 lectures following in the next few months is brought to you by the North Herts African Caribbean community. So we're so pleased to have you here and so pleased to have you join us while we learn from one of the greats. So, Michael, I forgot to say, just a bit of housekeeping. We will have a question and answer section. So Michael will do a presentation. I'll interview him for a little bit, and then we'll have an audience Q&A. And until that point, while your cameras can be on, and it's great to see the faces, because, you know, in this virtual world, it's nice to know we're not speaking into a void. We won't be able to unmute you until we get to the question and answer session. And I think, is there any other housekeeping that we needed to do? If you pop any questions that you have in the chat as well, I'll try to keep track of those and make sure that you get an answer in there. But other than that, I think we just get moving.
Thank you, Stacey. Thank you, Stacey, and thank you to the North Herts African Caribbean Community Group for inviting me to come and give this presentation this evening. I have a PowerPoint presentation prepared, so I'm kind of going to be referring to that possibly in the context of questions, but also in response to some of the points I want to raise about the front room. You see before you an image, actually the front cover of the Front Room book, and worth mentioning because this book is out of print now, but I'm in the process of editing a revised edition, which will be out this autumn, and it's going to be published by Ludd Humphreys. One of the extensions that I want to bring in more here is about immigration. I am the son of an immigrant, and you know, one of the first questions here I've been asked is, tell us my story. How did you get here? Well, me born here. I'm born here. Both my parents are from St. Vincent. They came here as part of that post-war migration. You know, that now people call it the Windrush generation, you know, 1948 and so forth. And I was born in High Wycombe, which is where the Vincentians colonized this town in Buckinghamshire. But I also want to kind of speak to this moment because it still resonates now. And I'm referring to Stuart Hall's seminal essay, Reconstruction Work, where he looks at documentary images of post-war Black settlement in Picture Post, 1956, pictorial essay, 30,000 color problems. And you see before you an image here of, from the Getty images of West Indians arriving at Southampton. I mean, these Black subjects are portrayed as social problems, which in the British popular imaginary is a code for the racial problem of immigration, Brexit, and the Windrush scandal. Let's be aware of these things that are still going on now. So born in the UK and growing up in Black in Britain, I am symbolically one of those social problems. I therefore embrace reconstruction work in my practice as a writer, artist, curator, and scholar. So that's a history of where I come from. And in relation to thinking about this question of Black history here, empire begins with the British home. And the things that we take for granted, sugar, cotton, coffee, mahogany, china, spices, interior decor, arrived here through imperialism, okay? And through a class of servitude, because remember, colonialism began in Britain because the white working class were treated as a different race. So as a project, it was first tried out here in this country before it was exported. Yet, Black, British and white working class domestic material culture and the lived experience of the home is either erased or hidden when we think about British, classic British interior design and social history. And this is an element of what we might call about Black history, because one of the reasons it's come about is because we as a people have been told that we have no history. We are written out of history. We are erased from history. But my ambition, my aspiration is to reinsert us back into history, to ultimately where Black history does not make significance, where there's only one history and we are connected to that history. And in this current time where we have a government who are pushing history as if, you know, the empire was such a wonderful thing, we need to resist that. As Walter Benjamin once said, all monuments of civilization are also monuments of barbarism. So any of these monuments we see in this sceptred isle are also monuments of barbarism, okay? So yeah, I resist the notion of being ghettoized in October, you know, as if we can just be Black for 1 month. No, I'm Black 24/7. And in making the front room, and here I have some links here to a film that came out of the West Indian front room when it was at the Jeffrey Museum 15 years ago, Tales from the Front Room. Some of you may have seen this documentary, as well as a link to the book. One of the things for me was that I had no intention of consciously making the front room a Black history thing, in other words. It was just a project I was interested in. The genius of it really begins when I was doing some oral history work with some Caribbean elders in High Wycombe. And I had a deja vu moment. And I thought, oh my God, I'm in the same room. What's going on? How come I'm in the same room? And then it dawned on me that the front room was part of me. It was part of my formation. Of course, growing up, I thought the front room was kitsch. It had all that colonial mentality. It seemed as though it had no taste, no taste at all. But then as an artist, I suppose, a part of, exploring something is that you begin to you love it and you hate it. So I'm still ambivalent about the front room. I still think it claims all those coloniality. In fact, it's a conservative space, as Stuart Hall would say. So it's such a conservative space of the Black life that the wider society never quite understands that this space represents our values and so forth. And that for me makes it a rich area of exploration. Of course, the front room didn't begin with, you know, our parents arriving here. They had to endure the one room situation. And the paraffin heater that you see here is a symbol of that moment of arrival, the trauma, in fact, of arrival in a strange place. And the paraffin heater, some of you may be familiar with this instrument here because it precedes central heating. And we had to go and fetch paraffin to go and put in it. I think there would be a lot of issues around child health and safety if we had to do this now, but this is what we did back in the day. And also Greenshill stamps. Greenshill stamps precedes Argos, Littlewoods. We'd collect these things, you'd buy something and you get hundreds of Greenshill stamps, stick them in a book, and then you return them for some goods from the Greenshill stamps catalogue. But why I'm included there, it's a moment of saving. It's a moment of deferred gratification. It's before credit. This idea of credit where we get the thing and we pay tomorrow. No, that didn't happen. Although if you had higher purchase. So it's a culture that I want to kind of put out there in a sense of values that becomes part of the front room, because the things that we have in the front room cost a lot of money. These are some of the first iterations. And so when I did having interviewed those Caribbean elders, I was doing a book in High Wycombe called The Black Boy Pub and Other Stories. There's actually a pub in the town called the Black Boy Pub, and it's over 300 years old, and it's important because that precedes, 1948. The museum there had no money. They wanted me to do an exhibition, and I thought, well, necessity is the mother of invention. I borrowed some of my auntie's things, my mom's crochet, and I created a basic front room. That's the bottom left. And it worked. It seemed to resonate with people. It was very simple. I then did it in Manchester. And that was phenomenal, because then I realized I had something kind of powerful, in a sense. As I began to do it, the more I began to understand the significance of the front room as a container of our values, our aspirations. This here is an image of the West Indian front room at the Jeffrey Museum, where it is now, again, a permanent period room. So I had a much larger budget at the Jeffrey Museum. I spent a year sourcing all of these things. I'm a bit of a scavenger. I love flea markets and secondhand shops and everything. And of course, I was donated things. People would ring me up and say, oh, my parents have passed away. We're chucking it in a skip. I said, no, let me come and check the things. So to this day, people are still contacting me and donating things or offering me things for the installation. This central installation here that you see before you was contextualized by an exhibition. And here's some other details from the actual installation itself. And it was contextualized by oral histories and an exhibition of photographs which speak to that moment of arrival. Interestingly, we had these audio oral histories accessed via these phones. And I love this image because these boys, these kids, did not know what this instrument, or didn't know it was a phone, because they're used to their press button technology. So they took a while to understand that actually this was a phone and you had to dial up. Yeah, it was an analog a device. And we also had, as an installation, being an installation is different from a display. It means that people can come into it. I'm interested in what happens to the body when people come into this space, how they change, how they kind of straighten up, as it were. Because the front room is not it's not for being comfortable. You don't sit around and lounge around. There's no vulgarity. Why is that? As a legacy of the kind of colonial Victorian values of respectability, decorum, and propriety. These are all coded in that room. Okay, so it's a complex space. I was also proud to have people of my parents' generation visit the exhibition. How am I doing for time?
You're doing all right for the minute. A couple more minutes.
Because for me as an artist, if the work I create can communicate to my mum, then it's working. And I was just, humbled the fact that people of this generation, my parents' generation, were able to connect with the work. I mean, I can talk loads about different objects and things in the room. One significant thing is the radiogram, the music, and you might have heard Jim Reeves earlier, and I'll talk about him in a moment. But the radiogram is significant because early West Indians, the Windrush generation, were often banned from pubs and clubs in this country, which is another story about race and a legacy of colonialism. As a result, they then entertained themselves at home in the front room with the radiogram, playing imported music. And we heard earlier possibly the Mighty Sparrow, Mr. Walker. And with the radiogram in the front room playing this imported music, jazz, ska, soca, calypso, blue beat, reggae, soul, all of these genres, begins the first house parties. And in fact, the blues begins. And in fact, the sound system culture begins with the radiogram. So it's a very significant object, appliance. Sound system, of course, comes from Jamaica. And there's a connection here with the technology as well. Now, what was the room used for? Well, as I said, house parties. It was also used as part of the night. So with a coffin, just the same as if my parents, they were brought out, their coffins were brought home, my mum and dad, opened up so people could come round to pay their last respects on their night, the night before they were buried. So the front room is a multifunctional space. And then also I have an image here from South Rockers, Soulheads and Lovers, a kind of tangential project that it came out of the front room around sound system culture. There's also the ornaments. Some of this you'll be familiar with, the crochet. The crochet here is iron starch, and crochet is very important because it was introduced to the Caribbean, like elsewhere in the empire, by the missionaries. Traditional European crochet is often white and cream and flat, but Caribbean women creolized crochet, yes, introducing color and sculpture, and as I mentioned, making it 3D in terms of it becoming iron starch. Crochet is never displayed on its own. It's always used to enhance something, such as a vase with artificial flowers. So the front room, traditional front room, did not have real flowers, folks. It had artificial flowers. Why? Because they last forever. So the room is a series of pragmatic practices. You have the blue glass fish, and anyone has, probably I'm sure has some of these fish. They're collectible. If it has Murano on the bottom, it's collectible, it's worth money, folks. We have the sofa here with the antimacassars chair backs. We couldn't get it plastic covered. I am endeavoring to do that. And then you have this Bambi ornament from the film, the Disney film, 1970s film. There are lots of other ornaments I can share with you, but there's also the things on the wall. The Last Supper. The Last Supper is important, even if you're not go to church, even if you're not religious. It's about a sign of announcing and declaring respectability. The black velour scroll. This was important for me because I didn't learn about St. Vincent at school. So this is where I could see, oh, this is where my parents come from. You have the wedding photos where the frame is just as important as the photo. Okay. And then you have someone like Tina. She's an interesting character, very popular in this country here in a post-war era. And, you know, working class people wanted to kind of dress the austerity. The interesting thing about the front room, particularly religious homes, she might not be in there, but she might be introduced by men, maybe. There's a whole story about Tina and her, you know, this exotic looking, erotic woman. We don't know where she comes from. And then in the center, you have the great Muhammad Ali. So the moment of the front room, the West Indian front room in particular, is a moment of the civil rights era. It's a moment of radical Black politics. It's the moment of the Black Panthers, okay? And these would seep into the front room. These figures, yeah, would seep into the front room, including Dr. Martin Luther King. So the wall hangings are very significant. Others include this photo here by Vanley Burke. This family here looks like they're about to go to church or just come from church, okay? There's also a girl here, this photo by Neil Kinloch on a phone. So the phone becomes a sign of modernity because sometimes there's only one phone in one street, you know? We're probably used to everybody having multiple phones, but back in the day with these analog phones, ringing your relatives back home was an event. And there you have myself and one of my sisters in the front room in High Wycombe. We had no choice over these clothes. That's why I probably look miserable. But the room is significantly, if I come into a close for this moment here, is a woman's room. It was my mother's room. It was the women who control it. Men may use it, but it's the women who largely dress it. And within my mother, it's her working 2 to 3 jobs, right, to finance the things that went into that room. And these photos here from Neil Kinloch and Maxine Walker signify that sense of that pride, and that only the best can be used to dress the front room. It's important for Black women because often in in the kind of popular culture. They're not represented as respectable mothers, spouses. And the front room becomes a space where women, Black women, could express their feminine style and be feminine. So it's very layered in terms of an expression of Black female identity, but also women's identity in a sense. It's a room of their own in a way, and that makes it quite fascinating. And then there's television. When television arrived, the whole front room changed. You know, it was because traditionally people would say, oh, kids are not allowed in the front room. It's not a playroom. Remember, it's not a room to go and mess about in. But when the television arrived, it's as if the whole family now could come in because, of course, you know, we thought white people were going to be on television forever. But when we see a Black character, it's like, oh, the whole house is a Black character. And it didn't matter really that some of these Black characters were buffoonish. It's just their presence. So significant programs here, we have, of course, the Black and White Minstrel Show. Some of you may be old enough to remember this, but this was high time viewing on the BBC, you know? And it was only removed off the BBC in 1978 because it was considered racist. But it speaks to a long tradition of blackface minstrelly. And then there are programs such as Love Thy Neighbor, about a Black couple living next to a white couple and the husband being racist. And this sitcom was, I suppose, addressing real social issues that were going on at this time in Britain around neighbors and race relations. We have Roots. Roots was a big moment, the African-American mini drama series based on Alex Haley's novel Roots. A profound moment for Black viewers, an emotional moment because it traced and tracked a family from Africa, enslavement in Virginia, their emancipation right into the 20th century. And then you have the Fosters. And this was, I suppose, a sign of the Black British family arriving because in a sense, they were kind of normalized as any other British family. And here you have the great Norman Beaton, who also were featured in the later comedy series Desmond's. In the book, I am also going to talk about Star Trek because I'm a Trekker, and I'm going to talk about Lieutenant Uhura because as a Black boy, I had a crush on Lieutenant Uhura. You know, I'm going to admit that, I confess. Why? Because we didn't see many people that look like us, and certainly Black women. And so seeing Lieutenant Uhura and her name Uhura, which means Swahili for freedom, was really quite important. And Star Trek, I just watched Star Trek Next Generation earlier. Sorry, I'm a bit of an entrepreneur on Star Trek. You know. It's still, because Star Trek, what's important about Star Trek? Star Trek at the time was an allegory of contemporary issues that were racism. It dealt with racism, sexism, women's issues, human rights, war, peace. That's what Star Trek, and it still deals with those themes. Anyway, the front room has been iterated because of the Jeffrey Museum. It was their most successful exhibition they've ever had. Because of that success, I mentioned the BBC documentary Tales from the Front Room. I was then invited to take it around the world. So the next place was the Netherlands, and I worked for a year with Moroccan, Indonesian, Surinamese, and Antillean migrant communities to create an installation called Van House Out. And this is it, and it's in a gallery in Amsterdam called Imagine I See. And it's in a place called the Belma. The Belma is in the southeast of Amsterdam. Many of you have probably been to Amsterdam, probably to the center. And you'll probably see the canals, and they've got the coffee shops and all of that. It wasn't until I got to the Belma that I realized, oh my God, this is where they have the Black people in the Belma. And there you find, it was like going into Ridley or Brixton, you know? Nigerian, Ghanaian, Surinamese, the food was familiar. I thought, oh my God, I'm at home. So this is where we sit. This is where this exhibition was done in Amsterdam. And then it toured to Tilburg and then Utrecht, each time kind of adapting it. Here I worked with a performance, local hip hop group called Don't Hit Mama from Amsterdam. And they created a piece where they explored as young people the struggles to break out of home with the actual outline of the installation before we actually built it.
Michael, we've got about 1 more minute for presentation.
This last piece here, and I'll mention the later work. I went to Curacao. Curacao is off the coast of Venezuela. My mom was there as a maid before coming to England. This is called a living room surrounded by salt. There's a story about this, if I can just share it very quickly.
Yes.
It's basic, it's found objects, donated objects, and I thought the thing would be gone because this is an outlaw area. People will take your things at night to build their own home. So I thought the installation will last the day. It's surrounded by a line of salt. Salt was mined by slaves in Curacao. Salt is also used in spiritual practices. I think it would last for a day. Apparently it lasted for 2 weeks because people thought I was creating a ritual with the salt. I never crossed the line of salt.
Oh.
So that's a good point to finish on.
Well, you certainly left us curious.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you have questions, everyone, please pop them in the chat so that we'll start lining them up for the Q&A afterwards. But at this point, I'm going to try and dig a little deeper on your behalf to start with. I will start the interview with our guest. So you've told us a little bit of how you came to be doing work on the front room. And I'm wondering, at what point did you get really interested in Black history? At what point did you recognize that what you were doing is Black history, what you were experiencing? And when did Black history become a thing for you?
It's a really interesting question. I don't think I'm ever conscious of Black history until I'm told, oh, it is a Black History Month. You know, some people say that we're artists who happen to be Black. I could talk about, in a way, as artists, in terms of the interest in our work, it seems as though unless we're talking about race, they're not interested. So we get stereotyped, fixed into this notion that we should always talk about race. So to be honest, I'm not conscious of that, really. What I'm interested in is creating a work which speaks to my truth and the people I know. And if that reaches a bottom of humanity, then it reaches to other people as well. Of course, when I'm thinking of creating the front room, I'm thinking of a Black audience in the first instance. I'm thinking that's something that's culturally connected to them. Yeah. Does this work? Will this work? Will this resonate? Is this authentic? Is this true? I'm thinking of that. And it's got to be that for me in a way. As I said, if it reaches that human level, for me, it becomes universal, which is, I think, what the front room has achieved. It's become a kind of universal kind of resonance.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes beyond Black history.
Most definitely.
It connects with just history.
You lead into a nice topic there, because during your talk, you mentioned Caribbean values, you mentioned Black essence within the front room, that all these elements spoke to certain values.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, as you were doing this work and this research, what you identified as key values.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Those values are tied up with the kind of coloniality. So I mentioned earlier about respectability, and respectability is very important because it's saying one has self-respect to the outside world. Dignity is also important because dignity says that I know I'm human, even though you don't treat me as human. That's very important. That was very important for our parents, and it's still important. So there's a hangover of those values going on. And then the other element, which is dynamic and exciting, is creolization, the Creole. And this is, for example, to understand this, the language we speak, some people call it patois, people call it Creole. What it is a European language that's become Africanized with an African rhythm. And this language originates from enslavement. And it's a symbol of the things we do. We take European forms and we transform them. So the front room, all of that color, the wallpaper and the colorful carpet, they never seem to match, but it doesn't matter. Color is part of our lives. the richness and vibrancy of our lives. The
Sorry,
spirituality.
Michael.
Sorry.
Can I just interrupt you? I'm so sorry. I'm just getting some people saying that they can't hear you.
Oh.
And I think because the presentation is up, I don't know if it's a bit of a struggle for them to see you. Can we just collapse the presentation just so they can see the both of you speaking? Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
Is the sound better for everyone now? If you could pop in the chat if you're still having problems hearing.
Turn up your microphone, turn up your microphone, turn up the volume, turn up the volume.
Turn up the bass.
That's an instruction. That's an instruction. I can see people looking at this. Where's the volume? Where's the volume? Where's the volume?
Let us know if anybody's still not hearing. Do let us know, and otherwise we'll continue.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead because nobody said that they're still having issues.
Okay.
All right. Yes, Michael. So we were talking about the values, and that led into oh God, you had a nice little train going there. There was another point that you made within the presentation about the front room being a woman's space.
Yep.
And I was wondering about it, and this may be, again, because earlier before everyone came in, we were talking about the generations.
Yep.
I arrived in the UK way after the front room era. So I may be asking a completely nonsensical question here.
Yeah.
Would you say that arrival in the UK had an impact on gender roles and that aspect of culture, of Black culture?
That's a really good, interesting question, and one that is worth considering. How has arriving in this country shifted gender in this country? One of the reasons could be modernity. Arriving here in this country here, women were much more independent. So not that women didn't work back in the Caribbean, but you can see much more examples of it here where women had agency in terms of the workplace and independence. And as I said, my mom held two to three jobs, you know, and like a lot of Black women at that time, they had a main job and then they had another job probably as well to supplement. And that's to buy the things they wanted to buy to make their room feel nice. Because the front room, our homes, are a space of refuge and safety against a background of racial terror that's going on outside. Of course, the room gets invaded later on in the 80s with, you know, the police coming in and killing us. But that's another story. But it does shift gender. And I think a kind of post-imperial, post-colonial modernity comes to play. The 60s is where everything is available. You know, access to new consumer goods, appliances, and so forth. And these people, and particularly women, have access to this. And that's really significant. But they also still carry some of those values with them, yeah, around respectability. And some of that is gendered respectability. Because who gets judged if the front room don't look good? Who's under judgment? So in a sense, the front room and the home is still a space of division of labor, in a sense. It's still a space of that going on. You know, how does one negotiate that? How is that negotiated around gender? All
right.
So it's a complex issue. It's a complex issue. And things are not always what they appear to be. I think that's the other issue. It may not always appear what it is. That, you know, you may arrive as a guest in the front room and it's like the man is holding court, but he may be holding court, but he's not in control. He's not in control. He's not in control.
Oh, true talk, true talk. The difference between the image presented and the reality behind the scenes is always an interesting dynamic.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
So while you were doing this work, and for our guests as well, I'm wondering what you discovered that you felt was of real personal significance to you and how it made a difference in your life.
Okay, that's a really good, that's quite a layered, I mean, I think music has been really important, how it all comes out of the front room. The other thing that's been a joy and a real blessing to travel with this installation as around the world is to learn how across the diaspora, in the Netherlands, in South Africa, where I took it to the Caribbean, that we are so different and yet we are so similar. There are similar things going on and there are different things. And that's exciting because, you know, I try not to walk with anything. I just walk with the idea and I source things locally. And in that process, I'm learning about the local expression of domestic identity and material culture. The thing that makes us all similar is the colonial experience. That's there. But also a retention of some African values, such as spirituality. I mean, that's one thing we all share is a sense of spirituality. You can say, so I've seen that in the Netherlands with the ceremonies. I've seen that in South Africa to a certain extent. I've seen that in the Caribbean. You know, they're all modulations on the same theme of spirituality. It's always there. Sometimes it gets covered over by religion. And you notice I'm making a distinction between spirituality and religion, organized religion, i.e. Christianity. Because Christianity that we as a people work with, use with, is a colonial Christian missionary form of Christianity. Okay? It's a form of Christianity that tells us to look to heaven while there's no food on the table. It's a Christianity that, in a sense, has been very important if we think of Black theological liberation, because a lot of our leaders have come out of the church. But the church is also a conservative space as well. So the Black church is a liberating space, but it's also a conservative space as well. These paradoxes, and I think these paradoxes work hand in hand. And I'm in doing the book again now. I'm learning quite a few things. Class. So some people say, we never have so much ornament on the mantelpiece. We had books. And what I think I need to talk about is class, because there is an assumption that because coming here, we have been class downsized, that we're all working class. No, we're not. Some of us have come from educated middle-class backgrounds. And that's important to talk about because there's a continuation of that going on. So the front room may have disappeared. My parents are now both gone. The house, you know, because of gentrification, the house they bought for a couple of thousand, we now sold for a couple of hundred thousand, to the people who look like they bought it from in the first place. Okay, so that's a sign of gentrification.
Yeah.
But we still have those values, and I can give you example of the values that we still have. And looking at some of your backgrounds in some of your rooms, that's it. The creolization, the plants that you have in the background, your lovely plants that you have, Stacey.
That's aloe, you know, every Black house must have some aloe plants.
The aloe plants, you know, some of these are real now. They may have been artificial in the past. So aloe vera, we can talk about aloe vera, the significance.
Oh yeah, that's another hour.
I'm fascinated by that old knowledge because now that my parents have gone, I try and practice the things that I grew up with, such as what I cook and using these old-time knowledge.
So we have questions coming in now. And so the first one, if we could unmute Jackie. Jackie's got a question here in the chat.
I'm looking for her question. The objects in the front room are specific to all Black family. How did that come to be without Designer magazine? A very interesting question, Jackie. Because people go to each other's place and say, oh, that looks nice. the next thing they're in the shop looking for it. Right? Now we tend to believe, and Stuart Hall is real and good on this, we believe individually that we're the only ones that have got certain vase. No one else has got it. And then we go around, we visit, and we find, oh my God, they got the same thing as me. Not quite the same, but they're similar. And that's how it gets transmitted, I think, through social networks, informal social networks, you know? And yeah, I see that in evidence when my mom used to follow her to Ridley Market, and she, you know, the journey would take, the time would take so long, not because she's looking for food, because she meet other people she's chatting with. And she chatting the labyrinth, you know, and catching the comments about who dead and who have sugar and why she don't know why who marries who and who having this and that. And part of that is the things that then get put into the front room. So I think that's one of the things, the ideas of similarity in a way, you know. The front room is, yeah, it becomes people are meeting up and say, oh, I want a front room, and they exchange each other where they can source that appliance and so forth. I think that is, even though we think we're individual. So there's another kind of paradox going on.
Well, I think that answered the next part of Jackie's question about individualism versus conformity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's a tension.
So I'm not seeing, have other questions been added?
I'm looking
I'm not seeing any other questions. If you do want to ask a question, there is the option to, there's usually option to raise your hand under the reactions button.
Mm-hmm.
So please do raise your hand, and Tony will unmute you.
Okay.
While we wait, I'm not seeing anybody with their hand. Oh, yep. No, Leah's clapping. Yeah, Leo, you have a nope. No, not seeing anybody with their hands up. So while we wait, I did want to ask, what have been some of the reactions to the front room? I mean, you've done this all over the world now. What are some of the kind of most striking, I guess, favorable and unfavorable reactions?
That's a really good question, Stacey. I've been humbled by the responses from the moment it began 15, 20 years ago. The responses have been wonderful. I'm humbled. I'm struck by how emotional people become. So emotional. When we opened the first night at the Jeffrey Museum, the opening night, I had on the mantelpiece 2 books of Greenshield stamps. On the opening night, someone thieved the book of Greenshield stamps.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, that's the reaction. People like, oh my God, I got to take it. So it does something. It has agency. You know, it's profound. The other kind of things come from a position of class. And I've been told, as I mentioned earlier, that people say, oh, we never had so much ornaments. I thought, that's interesting. Now, what that is for me telling me is telling me more about them than what I've created and what they're speaking to this class. Because I'm doing a series of sessions for a group called Ubele at the moment. Ubele is a Black-led community initiative. It's very big. You may be familiar. It's worth seeing. And someone said, oh, you never had the piano in there. And I thought, why wouldn't I? Tell you, I'm coming from a working class background. I wouldn't have the piano. And at some point, my parents bought a piano, thinking that the piano would make us learn to play the piano. We never learned to play the piano. They didn't know how to play it. They just put it there because they thought, oh, people have the piano in the front room. And probably it was more a symbol. It's more symbolic than functional. You know, nobody played.
Aspirational.
Aspirational, exactly, aspirational. So I think that's important to talk about these ideas, because people will often say the things in the front room is about being a puppet show, showing off. No, I think that's too simplistic. There probably is that, you know, it's more complex than trying to look like the Joneses. Much more complex, more layered than that. looking like the Joneses or looking like the puppet show is a bit of a simplistic thing. And there is that element of styling. See me, see I have money. There's that going on. Conspicuous consumption, bling, that is going on. Don't get me wrong, it's going on. But there are other layers as well, I think, that are being performed in the front room.
Lee has a question for us.
Yeah.
Can you unmute, Lee? Yeah. Oh no, I think she had her hand up. Have you unmuted her? Yeah.
There we go. We're done. We're good there. Hello. I was clapping as well. But oh, this has been amazing. And what surprised me first of all was how I recognised the front room as well from my childhood, from my parents and my grandparents, and yeah, and the little ornaments and things are very familiar to me as well, and it's it warms my heart to know how much we do have in common, you know, and it's just so. It was more the back room for us that was the usable room. Yeah. The front room was always covered in sheets and things, and it was only when the Queen came to visit, or just in case, you know, because she might. And yes, if there was a funeral, that might be where the person was laid out. But I have to come on to Star Trek because I am a massive fan, and I think it has always been reflective of culture, and Uhuru coming along as the first incredible black female actor. And I don't know, Michael, if you've now watching the latest series, Discovery. Yeah, because the black strong cast that just own it are just absolutely awesome, and the main lead character, and I could talk about Star Trek all night as well. Yeah,
because I'm just about to go, where's your question, Lee?
Make it a bit more inclusive, the significance of what Star Trek is, because Discovery is worth seeing. It's got a black leads, it's got queer couples, gay couples. I think that's it. It's, you know, it's still maintaining its head of a time. I am fascinated by science fiction, because science fiction is telling us, is a projection onto the future of the now. Mm-hmm. And I'm always interested in science fiction and seeing people look like me in the future. Because if I'm not there in the future, it tells me that these white people do not consider that we're in the future. And Star Trek has always said, we are part of the future. That is very important. So just to make that, bring people in, the significance for me of Star Trek.
We've got a question from Errol. Can you unmute Errol, please?
Yeah.
Go on, brother.
If you unmute yourself, Errol. There we go.
Yeah. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Michael, greetings. Again. Yeah. So I was asking about moving the presentation, and someone was saying, was I asking you if you could sing? And my mind flashed back to the last time we were raving together, you and I. I was back in the room, and because we know one another, and thanks for the trip back down memory lane as well, in terms of the St. Vincent link, which is where I was born.
Yeah. And
the High Wycombe, where
connection.
Loads of our family used to go there on a Sunday, or they used to come down to our home, and
that's right.
Sit in the front room with the blue spot and the Grundy we used to have at one time on a Sunday with Jim Reeves and so on. And those memories are so important, and it has to be preserved, really, and you've been doing a sterling job of preserving them, you know. So that's all I want to say. Just
so it's a statement more. It's more in our question, Errol, is a statement.
It's a statement, really.
Okay, no problem. I think you've raised a really good point. I'm still surprised with the front room. When we installed it at Tate Britain, and just a plug here, it's at Tate Britain now in a wonderful, massive show called Life Between Islands.
Go see it.
British Caribbean art, 1950s to now, it has 45 other artists. So it's not just me, not just the front room. What I was amazed at when we were installing it, I had young white art technicians, and all of them loved that room because they said, oh, it's like my mum, it's like my auntie and my grandmother. So in a sense, the front room, yes, physically is gone, but it still resonates. It's still there. It's still going. And in this time of our IKEA plain whited wall, I don't want no wallpaper kind of space, the values are still there. We still want to show off what we have. Yeah, because Black folks, we're hyper modern. Very few of us are into antiques. And I'm trying to get people to be interested in collecting these things, because this is now all considered retro chic.
Oh yeah.
It's retro chic. And
vintage.
people are paying money for this, I'm telling you. Someone told me about the radiogram the other day. I said, listen, put it on Facebook Marketplace. You can pick up a couple hundred for it.
Michael, this might play into one of the questions. Somebody was asking if you're still accepting donations. They might rethink that now that you said.
Exactly. I mean, it's difficult for me because I've got so much stuff. I mean, I could do a whole thing on radiograms, the amount of radiograms that people are offering to me. But I also say, listen, you can, if it's in a good condition, and it often is, because men, these West Indian men, they like to, polish the thing and make sure it's in a good condition. It's often in a good condition. It's collectible, particularly the Blaupunkt ones, which is the classic one, the big one, or the Grundig is a classic one. Yeah, but they're all over eBay and Facebook Marketplace. They're collectible. So what I'm saying, let's think about this. And in context of the museum, it's about realizing that we have collections. It's about bringing new knowledge into the museum. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to take one more question.
Yep.
And it has to be a question, people, not a statement.
I didn't mind Errol doing that. Errol, we are cool people.
No, I don't mind Errol either, but we do have Errol and Lee, and I know you're raising so many memories. People want to kind of just go with it. And it'd be lovely to have our own front room session where we're all just, sipping away and chilling.
Yeah.
But some of us do have to go. And I know, everybody's got time consideration. So I'm going to take one more question.
Is that Jackie?
It's either Jackie or Lee. So now they've made me have to choose. Oh. Okay, all right. Two more questions. So Lee had her hand up first, and then we'll go with Jackie's question, and then we'll start to wrap up. So if you unmute, Lee. Yes, no? There we go.
There we go. Yeah, I do have a question. How are you going to get this important stuff into schools? Because we need better education from the start. Is there anything you can do that you're thinking of doing to get the schools into this?
I think what you could do is talk to your school local.
Oh, I will.
Talk to your local schools.
Don't you worry. Yes.
Schools are always about networks, about connections, about connecting with teachers who get it. Because that's the entry from my experience. It's become very, very difficult at this moment to get into schools as an artist. Very difficult.
It always has been.
I still go into primary schools. Primary schools, I love primary schools because children, they're great. At that age, they're honest. If they don't like it, they'll tell you. If you're bullshitting, they'll tell you. And I love that age. They're very honest. Secondary school is more complex, but secondary is really important. Why? Because I teach at where they arrive after their A-level. So I see these young adults. Yeah. And so in terms of their education formation, it's really fundamental. But we are facing a struggle, folks. We are facing a struggle. The government wants to regress. There are years of regression. And we have to resist that, because this is about our children's well-being for the future. They are the future. So any parents here, it doesn't matter, go to your local school, tap them in and say, and I think you will find some teachers will be responsive. Some teachers will, that's the way to do it. Work on a local level, on a global mindset.
Okay, and Jackie now?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, my camera's not working, sorry. I just wondered about now. Is there a front room now? So the 20-year-olds, the 25-year-olds, Black family, are young people having a front room or some kind of thing that would signify that front room? And just myself, I was born in the 60s. My parents are on this talk as well. I collect, so I have brought my front room with me. So I have collected items that remind me of my front room. So I have the cabinet, which I got from an antique shop. That reminds me of my grandmother's cabinet. Lovely. I have the picture of, I have the all the saints, the Lord's Supper picture. I'm thinking of painting a new one, which is from my front room, which was the two paths to heaven. So one, so that was a classic picture. So I'm just wondering, now that we've got the Through Lounge and Magnolia, our designer magazines that tell us how we should have our front rooms. Where is our culture in our front rooms? And if we haven't got it, what does that say about where we are now as as Black young people in a community?
Okay. Couple of things. Thanks for your question, Jackie. James Baldwin says, and I'm using this quote continually now, he said, history is not in the past. History is in the present, because we carry it with us. We carry history with us. And we carry the front room with us, if you choose to look. If you choose to look. So instead of going to IKEA and having this minimalist, plain white wall thing, aesthetic, why not retrace something of your cultural history? And I'm not saying it has to be exactly like the front room, but they like little elements you've got, like the drinks cabinet. The drinks cabinet is a very functional thing. I'm thinking of buying one because I need to display some things in my place. So it's a pragmatic thing, because there are things, and this happens as you get older. You just acquire things, heirlooms. I have some of my parents' stuff. I'm not throwing them away. I'll pass them on to my son, God willing. But in the meantime, I need to keep them safe, and I want to display them. And what best than a lovely drinks cabinet or a cabinet with a glove? It's that similar style. I think I'm not going to talk about all of us as a mass, because that's how we're talked about in the white space. We're talked as if we're all the same. No, we're not. We are multitude and different and diverse. And there are some young Black people who are retracing this. They are retracing their history. They are interested in the past. They are interested in vinyl records and the analog era. And I'm always humbled by meeting young people, and just young people who are interested in this era. Yes, they're interested in vintage. They're interested in retro chic. Not always because it's a fashion, because they're interested in finding something of their past. And they also believe that in a time of lack of authenticity, they believe that the past is more authentic. Go with it, fine. And if it's about retracing their family and their culture, go for it. I support that. But that's not everyone. That's not everyone. Just the same, not all of us can be revolutionaries and activists. We like to think we can, but we're not.
Small acts.
Small acts. We are small acts. We are small acts. That's right.
So we're going to take Elizabeth's question and then wrap up.
Hi, sister. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right. So recently I went to a friend a friend of a friend's home, a British English lady, and she had a lot of furniture and chairs that had been handed down from her grandparents, old stuff. So I feel that being child of immigrants, that's something that is probably missing, is that handed down of furniture and items. So I'm just trying to think around how we can, generations can start that, because it wasn't nice furniture. It was like, you know, brown old furniture, but she was keeping it and it was meaningful to her, and it was, you could tell it was just old furniture that was meaningful and valuable to her. So how could we start to create that kind of thing as children of
really good question,
immigrants?
Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is an artist who has done some work at the Museum of the Home. She makes miniature. She made a miniature radiogram, no, miniature drinks cabinet. And so I just want to plug Elizabeth here as a maker, an artist, a craft maker in her own right.
Thank you.
And what's the website? The black
Black Girl Dolls House Club. Black Girl Dolls House Club.
She makes
Oh
dolls.
yeah, I'm following you on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's a good question you have, Elizabeth. It's about really, one of my moms say, who feels it knows it? Unless you know it, because I've heard so many people say, oh, we chucked it all away. Okay, that's gone now. Other people are interested and they are collecting and they are curious and they will hold on to some things. The challenge we face is storage. Because, you know, you've probably got a home, you've already decked out with stuff, you take this stuff, and where are you going to put it? So the issue, and so therefore one has to be selective. Yeah, okay, that sofa may look nice, but I ain't got no space to take the sofa. Someone has to be selective about items that we may use and be pragmatic. Be pragmatic about what we can take on. So it's, you know, people are passing away and these things are being passed on, hopefully, rather than put in a skip. I think there's a shift. I'm getting a lot more people who are contacting me and saying, okay, parents have passed. Are you interested in this stuff? And I say, yeah, let's have a look. You know, and I may not be able to use it in the installation, but I can certainly advise about how it could be then passed on to something of good use. Yeah, or talk about the items, the significance of individual things in a way. But it's a complex question.
Well, that's
it
a nice.
answers you in some way.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's a nice little business idea for someone. They can refurbish it all and
yes,
sell it all with meaning and the stories. Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm very aware we've gone over by 10 minutes. We are really keeping with the Caribbean theme at the moment. I think now is the time to just wrap up with one final question for Michael. And that question is, what's the single most important message that you want us all to leave with today?
Oh, dear. The things in your home tell you who you are, actually. They all, every little thing you've curated in your home has been chosen by you, sometimes unconsciously, but they say something about who you are, really, and they have the emotional resonance. They have power, they have agency. In fact, they have a spirit in those things. So take note of that in going forward. Value the things that we have in our home. Value the things we have in our home. It's who we are.
All right. There you have it, folks. This has been Dr. Michael McMillan, brought to you by North Herts African Caribbean Community. And I've been your host, Stacey Lee Ross. It's been an absolute pleasure having you guys here. It's wonderful to see so many of you turn up to hear a bit about our culture and our history And we hope that we see you for the next one. I know Alva will be sending out information and dates. Our next speaker will be Dr. Emily Zobel-Marshall, who talks about our storytelling throughout the diaspora, you know, Anansi, the trickster, all these very familiar tales that we know about from our childhood or have heard of and we don't quite know the origin. This is the lady to tell you these things. So thank you very, very much for coming, and we hope to see you again soon. I hope you have enjoyed this and it's been of value to you. Have a lovely